Last weekend, they said around 7 million people participated in a protest. Protest was called No Kings. And it was about the fear that the current administration would turn this system of government into, at best, an oligarchy, which essentially means that the rich people are in control, or essentially a dictatorship. Of course, no kings would make you feel as if they're trying to turn it into a monarchy. And that may be the case. Now, it's not for me in this case to argue whether the country is turning into a monarchy or a socialist republic or anything in between. Although there have been signs and very clear warning signs of the dangers that this country may be ceding its power to the executive branch of government. And that, of course, is very concerning because our Constitution was made out of the idea that each part of the government, let's say it's slow connection, but hopefully it's not that bad, that each part of the government is co-equal: legislative, judicial, and of course the executive. Hi, this is Elder Adrian Hammond, and my key here is not to argue the merits of facts of whether this government is going to go into a monarchy or a dictatorship or an oligarchy or whatever you may want to call it. I would like to turn your attention, if I may, for a few moments, to the accusations made against those who took part in this protest. Whether or not you agree with the idea of no kings, some, of course, may agree with it wholeheartedly and give full support. Others may say, don't be silly. This is a democracy, always has been, always will be. And maybe it's better as a dictatorship. Of course, a few have said that. I don't think that many have said that. But the concern that I have is the mislabeling of those who took part. And those in I would say those that are currently in power, the political party that's in power, the Republicans, are giving the impression that these people are at best anarchists and at worst terrorists. Now, if I want to think about this carefully, a terrorist is someone that uses terror. That means they go about rampages of killing people, destroying property, or both, to get the attention of governments of their plight. The problem with this approach, of course, is that if you are taking lives, then that turns people's attention to you in a not so good way. They don't want to listen to your pleas for help. They don't want to listen to your points, which may not be that bad. But because you're killing someone and or you're destroying property, then no one's listening to you. All they know is that you've killed 25 people, 45 people, 100 people. The reason why you're a terrorist is because such group of people, even though it seems like a lot, and it is a lot, that compared to the entire population, let's say, of the United States, that's not that much. Now, once you take it full advantage of essentially looking at what happened with Hamas when they originally went inside Israel and killed over 1,000 people. Now, the population of Israel is not nearly the amount of the U.S., but I'm going to assume that possibly between 10 and 20 million people live in Israel. And if that's the case, then the killing of 1,000 would be close to, or at least would be, it would be the equivalent of there being possibly 6 or 7, well, say, yeah, 6 or 7 World Trade Center catastrophes, which of course would completely devastate us in terms of the amount of carnage. I'm saying all this is because the people that are marching do not seem to be terrorists. Now, they make the link because they feel like anyone that is part of this would be what is called Antifa. And you've heard of that a lot over the last several years because our current president has been fighting against Antifa and essentially trying to destroy an organization that, to be honest, is not really an organization. It's a name, and there are people that claim to be part of it, but they're not organized like a normal terrorist organization like Hamas or Hezbollah, or even the older ones had Weather Underground. You had those that essentially, maybe the PLO, all these that used to hijack planes and put hundreds of people and lives in danger to get their point across. But these are people that are marching. They're not destroying property, at least most of them, vast majority of them. They're not pointing guns at people. They're not hijacking people or kidnapping them. They're not spreading terror. They are trying to make a point that they don't want the federal government to end up becoming a monarchy or a dictatorship or an oligarchy. Either one of those they don't want. The problem with naming people such things is because, contrary to what others may think, that people listen. And there are some who are not as emotionally stable, mentally stable, that would then take up the charge, so to speak, of ridding themselves, and then the nation, of course, from these terrorists, because you call them terrorists. Not because they do terroristic activities, but because you call them terrorists. And if the numbers are correct, about 7 million people participating all over the country in these forms of protest, then you're calling 7 million terrorists or communists. Like, of course, communist is a bad name. And there are a few countries that provide at least a semblance of communism. Russia used to, as the Soviet Union, is turned more into an oligarchy punctuated by the presence of Vladimir Putin. But those that are truly communists, it's not really a very popular form of government. So that they say socialists, as if that's a bad name. Socialist is mainly telling that the social network of countries are probably more tied into the federal government or to the central government than anything else. And so, for instance, if you have health care, it's be supplied by the government. If you have schools are free. The services are supplied by the government. And on and on and so on and so on and so on. Of course, that means that you have to have enough funding for that. Hospitals, of course, medical care, funded by the government. So all these things take place. And people don't like the idea of more taxes, which I understand. Except when you want your streets to be filled, instead of having potholes, when you have your lights that are blinking off, you need to maybe oversee some bridges that are beginning to crumble. All these things, essentially, we want good bridges, we want good roads, we want good hospitals, we want good schools, but we don't want to pay the money to do it. And I know I'm going on a tangent, but that essentially is the idea of socialism. The people take it upon themselves to supply enough funding for what the government can then distribute as services. There are many socialist countries, most of them in Europe. They're not a dictatorship, but people don't want, I guess, the idea of government getting into their business. That's possibly why. In any case, these people that are marching or have marched do not seem to be advocating any violence against others. They are mainly, again, against the idea of our democratic government turning into a monarchy, no kings, or a dictatorship, or an oligarchy, which means you only care for those who are rich. One of the things that, again, also puzzled me was the fight back of our president, which I thought would actually be above such things, but he's not. And so that's what he does. So he made a picture of him wearing a crown in an airplane and dumping raw fecal matter on people, liquid fecal matter, which of course is extremely disgusting. But the idea was this is supposed to have been as a joke, hopefully, a joke. But the idea really is, why are we participating in such jokes when we can't even open our government? When we essentially cannot, well, I don't care who's at fault, but our government can't be opened. That people are losing their jobs, that people have to get by without their paychecks. I'm assuming if the congressmen and congresswomen who have been dismissed, if they also lost their paychecks during this time, they would be fighting to get this thing done. And maybe that's what we should do, is make sure that everyone that is participating in this particular event, then everyone loses their paycheck. They're furloughed until this is resolved. Now, again, that's just me, but I just was very curious and very disheartened at the categorization of people who protest as communists, as Antifa, as terrorists, when none of them acted close to that faction. Let's say someone did get assigned from the Communist Party. Not everybody's communist. Not everyone that marched is communist. So finding signs and then judging what everybody is participating for, and it must be communist, not quite true. We don't know how many were communists. Most likely, most of them were not. They were regular citizens who didn't like where this country was going. That's it. So let's stop with the name calling. Let's stop with the labeling. It's like we can't say anything about the basket of deplorables, which was a horrible thing to say, admittedly, by at that point, it was the Secretary of State, at least it was Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who wanted to go for president. Bad thing to say. So if that was bad to say, then why is labeling all these people things that the country despises just because they don't like what the president is doing? Those who don't like, last thing, those who don't like what the president's doing may not be happy with the party which he belongs to, but that doesn't mean that person's un-American. Doesn't mean that person is waiting for the overthrow of the government. It's not saying that the person supports terrorists. It's none of that. Maybe some people who were part of the Palestinian movement during the, protests. But even then, it's not saying that they're supporting Hamas or they're denying Israel the right to exist. But they're marching. People are marching of every color, creed, culture. 7 million people, 7 million people. If it's not that much, then okay. But I know more than one person went out there and marched. The key is, if you don't like their politics, fine. But let's stop with the name calling. And as saints of God, we should not even be close to participating in something like that. Even if the other side, Democrats, started name calling. Maybe you don't think that they should be labeling it as no kings, that Donald Trump doesn't want to be a king. Okay, fine. But don't get it back into the pigsty with them. Start calling people names which you know would cause those to abhor what's taking place. Let's be civil. Can we try that for one time? Especially as saints of God. Let's be civil. God bless you. Take care. Love you all in Jesus' name.